Hi, everybody. This is Bill calling again from Billboard Comics. Yes, like on your phone. Well, I'm recording this on my phone, so it kind of fits. Back again with another installment of my growing up comics feature, where I would talk to you about the stuff in my youth, growing up as a comic book reader in the 70s and 80s, and a comic book collector from the 80s on. That I think is good to look at from a historical perspective from somebody who was there. There's a lot of stuff that has gone by the wayside that's very popular back in the day, and this is just a way of my way of kind of like spreading like stories to people who might either remember them themselves or might not have any knowledge about them beforehand, and kind of pass that along to them. Today we're gonna get a little bit racy. We're gonna get a little bit sassy, a little bit spicy. We're gonna talk about underwear. If you're looking at this face and thinking like, oh God, I'd rather have my skull drilled in by a 3/4 inch drill bit than listen to this guy talk about underwear. I apologize to you and your family. You could probably leave this. But before you do that, I'm going to talk to you about a special kind of underwear, a very special kind of underwear that it was very good, was around for a limited amount of time when I was a kid and still lies with me. It's the underwear brand called Underoos. Now, for those of you who are in America, you might automatically have big kind of like memories of Underoos. Some people who might be watching this video from outside the United States might be like, just like you were in Captain America: Civil War, saying, "What the heck are Underoos?" Well, Underoos was a special kind of side brand. It was thought up by an outside corporation. I forget the person's name. I should have written it down, but I didn't. I apologize for that. Worked with Fruit of the Loom to license to distribute a matching set of underwear revolving around comic book characters. Not just comic book characters, also like popular culture characters. You have like a whole bunch of people. I will go into it a little bit later on to let you know exactly who was there, who was involved in that. But they were licensed by DC Comics, Marvel Comics, Hanna-Barbera, and Archie, and a whole bunch of other ones. Well, basically, it was a set. It came in a square cardboard packaging, kind of stuffed in there, and you had a matching set. You had for boys, because obviously I was a boy, and I'm still a boy. Not to say anything wrong, you know, if you feel need to transfer over. I mean, some people might have a problem with that. I don't. As long as you don't hurt anybody, that's my attitude. But you'd have a top, like say Flash would be. You'd have a red T-shirt with the Flash logo on the chest, and the underwear would be red underwear with like a white stripe across the waistband. And this was like some of the best kind of underwear I've ever had my entire life. I remember being a little kid, and I think I mentioned this before and other stuff like this. This used to be my underwear of choice when I used to get underwear, and my parents were very, very generous about getting it for me. We didn't have a lot of money, but I guess they figured since it was clothes and clothes are necessities, they were more than willing to actually pay the money for it. Like I got started in 1978, back when I was like probably 6. So we went through that. It was kind of like I've mentioned this in another video before. I had pretty much every one of them. If I could get my hands on, they were sold in my area, and I used to love like going to school and wearing them in there. I like wear them with my shirt. Like I'd have like button up flannel or like a t-shirt, not a t-shirt, like underneath it or whatever. And like during the day, towards the end of the day, like we were having like our private time or study time or whatever. This is in grade school. I'd go to them and say, "Excuse me, Miss Costello, I'm getting hot. Can I take off my shirt?" She goes, "Sure, go ahead." And I take off the shirt, and I all of a sudden be Superman or Flash or whatever. A lot of them like were based like to replica the actual superhero kind of costumes. I think Superman was like had the blue shirt with the S shield, and the under part was red and yellow to simulate his trunks from the comic books. Not every superhero got this. The Hulk, for instance, basically was a picture of the Hulk running. It's one of his classic like marketing poses and stuff like that. Some took up the entire center of the thing. Some only like I said, design over the heart of the thing. I try to stay away from those because like those weren't really as fun as the other ones. I couldn't really pretend to be the Hulk by having like his picture on that stuff. But then again, I can understand their outlook because having an all green shirt with a purple pair of pants, it's basically you're having a green T-shirt and a purple pair of underwear. There's nothing really special about that. But they also had but the good thing about it is like, they had like stuff for boys and girls. They had Batgirl, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Catwoman. Catwoman, I think, might be another one of those cases where, like the Hulk, where it's more of a picture of the character than the actual costume. Because I think her costume at the time was a low cut dress, and I don't think many parents would like to have their 6 year olds dressed up in a low cut underwear, a pair of underwear representing a low cut dress. But they had a whole bunch of different characters from Marvel and DC: Aquaman, Batman, Captain America, Catwoman, Flash, Green Lantern. They had Plastic Man at one time. They had Shazam. They had Spider Man. They had Spider Woman. They had Superman. They had The Thing. I think The Thing was another one. Like they did just a picture. I don't think they did the actual thing. Wonder Woman again, and you know from outside the comic books, they had like He-Man, and Skeletor could do that. I believe at the time, it was a wide array of stuff, and it's also another thing about before the Cold War of the comic book companies, where they were not, nowadays the comic book companies would perish the thought license their goods and services to the same company. You're making a toy for my comic book from DC. You're not gonna get my business. I'm gonna go to Hasbro and use them instead. But here you could like commingle and stuff like this, and do that. And like I said, there were matching sets. Not that anybody was actually seeing your underwear. I grew up in the 70s, and 70s were kind of hippy dippy, freaky, kind of free love kind of thing. But they drew a line of having like, preteen boys running around classrooms in their underwear. Nobody saw that, but just to be able to show off the T-shirt made me feel so happy and gave me so much joy because I was able to pretend like like in school that I was a superhero. Not that any of the kids noticed, not that any of the teachers noticed, not that anybody except me actually got anything out of it, but I did get something out of it and kind of made my that era of my schooling really enjoyable. These lasted several years and then they kind of died out, like in the mid '80s, I believe. By the time I grew out of it, they didn't really have sizes for teenagers at the time, so I just basically went with the typical. I'm not going to go into my underwear selection there. I stopped myself there. You don't need to hear that, and you're welcome. But a couple years ago, they brought these back. They brought back for adult people. Like they had a select line of stuff. I think the Punisher was one of the Underoos stuff, which goes to tell you exactly what the target market for the reboot was. Firmly adults. But I believe that little thing, it was just recently, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. At least it seems to me like that. It could be even longer. That's out of like business now because you try looking for it like any kind of like new Underoos. You can still find them on Amazon, which might be from secondary sellers who might have like some backstock that they picked up from like kind of like bulk lot kind of boxes, merchandise boxes, remainder boxes that they're selling off slowly. But at one time, they had like a whole website devoted to them. You could have gotten Masters Universe, and I think Ghostbusters were on there, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. But they're all made for in adult sizes mostly. I think outside kid sizes, but I don't remember because these sites no longer exist. Of like color Underoos that you could wear as an adult. Of course, they came back in an era where Styling Online has a whole list of comic book T-shirts that resembled the comic book costumes. Same with graffiti designs. Graffiti designs, I have a whole bunch of stuff like this, all the way from like Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man, all the way up to like Mage and you know the Reverse Flash and Captain Marvel. So the novelty of having a T-shirt with your that you can wear underneath your clothes with a superhero insignia on it kind of like faded as the collector's market got a little bit more savvy to it and decided to make more of a product that had a more wide-ranging appeal. And like I still have fond memories about that even today. Like as a little kid, just like wearing it to school and doing stuff like this. Not that anything was perfect. Like I said, the Hulk was like basically like a little picture on the thing. Spider-Man did have a logo, had like made it look like a little bit like his webbing kind of design, but it was only the chest. It didn't go over the shirts or the sleeves or anything like that. So it's kind of like a pale imitation of his costume from the comic books. That's what I remember of it being that way. But even at the time, it was a fun thing to collect as a kid, fun thing to wear as a kid, and maybe you'll see like a bunch of examples here spread throughout. Did you like Underoos growing up? Do you remember them? Would you wear them today if you had a chance if they came back again? Would you do you miss the fact that you didn't have them when you were a kid because you would have loved to get dressed up as Batman underneath your clothes as you went to school? Leave a comment to start a discussion about that. I like to hear about that from other people because like for me it was like Underoos kind of kind of trans trying like to put the right word for it, kind of like went beyond just the bounds of comic book fans and comic book readers. My wife remembers Underoos. She remembers like buying those as a kid, like with other kind of licensed things. I mean, like they had Scooby Doo Underoos. I think they had like maybe Strawberry Shortcake Underoos. They had a whole bunch of them, like for all kinds of brands and stuff like this, not just the superhero ones. I was more focused on the superhero ones because I used to read comic books as a kid. But she knows about Underoos. But then, like I was doing research for this, there's something about like how people in like a lot of like the news outlets had to explain what Underoos were to people overseas because it was a uniquely American kind of product. It didn't cross the boundaries of the actual, the Atlantic or the Pacific or whatever. Like do you remember? Did you ever hear of it? If you lived across the sea, about Underoos, what was your favorite Underoos that you wore as a kid? What pair of Underoos would be your favorite if they had it now? Put all the answers in the comments, and you know, and we'll talk about that. So I think that'll wrap it up right now for that. And until I see you again, keep on collecting.